What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the latest installment into the Expendables franchise, simply titled Expendables 4. Directed this time around by Waugh, this film once again stars people like Jason Statham, Sylvester Stallone, Randy Couture, Dolph Lundgren, and some new faces this time around like Megan Fox, 50 Cent, Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, and many others. So in the past, when I've talked about where my love for film originated, I can go back to being a kid and my parents putting incredible films from my childhood or from their past in front of me, and me just slowly learning about film culture, learning about films before my time through my parents and the things that made them excited. And where I was able to relate a lot with my dad were with those big action stars of the 80s and the 90s that were coming out around the time that I was a kid, as well as the movies that had come out before my time. And we always talked about how amazing it would be to one day have this huge movie that has all of these big stars that have never been in a film together in one movie. And then Expendables happened, and I remember being so hyped with that just because my dad and I used to talk about that movie existing, and they ended up making a few of them. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, then you'll know that a couple years back, me and my buddy Benny Juan Kenobi, who I haven't seen here on YouTube in quite some time, I hope he's doing okay, we ended up covering all three Expendables films. And for better or for worse, my overall thoughts on those films is that they're just good, dumb, fun action movies that are very, very weak when it comes to the narrative department, but ultimately deliver on the 80s, 90s charm that you want out of those films. And of course, they're all littered with a bunch of big names from the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s that made a name for themselves, most notably in action. Every here and there, you'd have a cast member that you're wondering why they're even in this movie at all, but more often than not, it was a big name that was nice to see amongst the rest of the cast. And here we are now with Expendables 4, or as they are putting it in the title, Expend4bles. And so, yeah, I was looking forward to checking this out because I think I was definitely part of the small, group of people that were saying, hey, I liked Expendables 1, 2, and 3. I enjoyed the third one enough to say, hey, I'd like to see maybe one more. Who else can they get? Can they get Jackie Chan? Maybe even get The Rock in there? Some of these big names that they can still add to this. There are so many names that you could think of. I'm sure you as a viewer are starting to list off plenty of names in your head from the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s in the action genre that definitely have earned a spot in the Expendables with these other big names. And here we are now with the fourth film, and unfortunately I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon of people who have not been enjoying this film and tell you that I think this is without a doubt the worst Expendables film that we've ever gotten. I'll start this off by saying that I think where this film shines in any capacity is a great use of costume design, some cool sets that were used throughout the course of the film, as well as some locations that were used, and some good stunt work that was done both on the hand-to-hand combat side of things, as well as when it comes to some of the gunplay. That's where this film was the most interesting to me, and if you're going into this for some mindless action, I would be remiss if I said that there wasn't at least some fun, mindless action sprinkled in throughout the course of this film. But that is about where my positives end for this movie, because unfortunately the rest of it just felt mediocre. It felt generic, it felt bland, and for a franchise that's maybe not always been the strongest narratively, what it lacked in narrative depth, it 110% made up for in its charm of just being a love letter to 80s action films, to 90s action films, and even early 2000s action films. And when it comes to Expendables 4, it just feels like it lost that charm. It feels like it lost its direction and what this franchise was meant to be for these stars, and ultimately just comes across as another generic, paycheck movie for these actors. When it comes to the dialogue, the overall script, the narrative as a whole, the acting throughout the course of this film, and the absolutely subpar use of visual effects over the course of the film, Without a doubt, Expendables 4 is at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to this franchise. There was not much here that was really worth going back to ever revisit again, nor was there anything in here that I could say is really gonna wet your whistle. What I loved about those first three films is while they were cheesy, while they were dumb, while there was elements about them that were goofy, and while they also did equip some pretty weak CGI at times, they ultimately knew what they were fun, they were dumb, there were some great action sequences with all of these stars that we love, and some great one-liners, including some reprisals of some of their big one-liners from their own individual films. And this film just doesn't have that. That charm wasn't there. That callback to the past wasn't fully there. And the cast element of the film for me really just kind of took me out of it. The biggest two big names that I can say that are in this that I think add to the cast because of their history within their own fields of film when it comes to action are Tony Jaa as well as Iko Uwais. Those two have done incredible, fantastic action films of the last 10, 15, 20 years and 110% earned their right to be in this movie. But when it comes to the other people that are like lead characters amidst the Expendables, like 50 Cent and Megan Fox, I was just looking at the screen a lot of times, scratching my head and just wondering what is going on here. Listen, I like some 50 Cent songs. I've enjoyed some. I have plenty on my playlist. Megan Fox has been in movies that I enjoy. She's not an actress I hate or anything like that. But these two added nothing to this movie for me, and they're just two of the many new faces that are added in here that just did nothing for me in this film. They didn't add to the charm of what this franchise is all about. Their acting and the dialogue that they were given was weak, and just on an overall level as far as this film, it just feels like it was rushed. It feels like there was no heart and no passion put into it. Again, it feels like the charm of what this franchise was all about has just completely faded with this installment. Again, some solid moments of action throughout the course of the film that might like pique your interest and make you think, okay, maybe we're headed in the right direction. But ultimately, some story choices that had me scratching my head. There's a big story moment in the early 15 minutes of the film. It's pretty much the inciting incident that gets the Expendables to go off on their adventure, on their mission. And it just had me scratching my head. I was thinking, there's no way they just did what I think they just did. And then the story plays out, and I won't say anything else, but ultimately, things constantly just felt underwhelming, really, is the best way to put it. I think that Expendables 3 was probably where they should have ended it. As somebody, again, who was, open to the idea of getting another Expendables film, this just did not do it for me. I was not excited by this film. I found it to be bland, boring, generic. Their one-liners did not hit. The action was enjoyable, but unfortunately it was attached to a movie that's just so subpar in other areas that I just can't see people really clamoring and having a lot of excitement for the franchise after this one. And even leading up to the release of this, I just feel like there wasn't really a lot of hype. I saw the trailer, I saw the posters, and I just feel like people weren't really excited for it. And I think part of it was the marketing didn't really push this great fun ride, this great fun adventure. And I think a lot of us were just thinking about all the other amazing action stars that should have been a part of this, but ultimately we got Megan Fox and 50 Cent. It just felt weak, it just felt boring, it just felt bland. And ultimately for this review, all I can really say is I don't necessarily know that this is a movie that you should rush to theaters to see. I think if you catch it on streaming one day because you're curious and you enjoyed the first three, then that's probably the best place to go and check this movie out, because I was at the theater just now, and the best part about it was being able to sit in a theater and eat some popcorn. That was my favorite part of going to the movies just now to watch this movie. Again, some cool moments of action, but nothing that really is going to be super memorable. I just think that this movie, it was just so dull that ultimately it didn't even make an impact. I wish I could be sitting here saying the movie is so bad, it was like just offensively bad. It was bad, but it was just so dull in being bad that I ultimately think that when I get to the end of the year and I look back at all the movies that I saw this year and I'm trying to decide what's going to be on my top 10 best and my top 10 worst, this movie is one of those movies that is just so bland and so dull and so forgettable that it won't even make my top 10 worst, because it didn't upset me enough to make my top 10 worst. But it just will be a movie that I'll scratch my head and think, oh, that came out this year, I completely forgot. So yeah, Expendables 4 or Expend4bles, whatever you want to call this movie, ultimately for me was just a I don't know, a cash grab, maybe, but I don't necessarily foresee this break in the box office this weekend. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you enjoy Expendables 4? Did you not enjoy Expendables 4? Again, I'm a huge fan of the OG cast members and these big action stars. I wanted to see another dumb, fun, action, mindless action movie with a simple narrative that has some great one-liners and some great reprisals of those one-liners, including a bunch of new faces along with the older faces. But ultimately what we get here is just a very underwhelming narrative with an underwhelming use of our, big hero characters. Introductions of new characters that are played by non-big action stars in any way, shape, or form, and just a very bland ending that literally left me feeling nothing by the time the movie was over. Expendables 4 is not great, and I don't recommend rushing to theaters to see it, even though, again, I have been a fan of this franchise. It pains me to say that Expendables 4 was as bad as it is and as forgettable as it is. I've only just left the theater, literally just got home 15 minutes ago from the theater, and it's already starting to just fade from my memory. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Definitely leave some comments down below. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.